Hi, I'm B from Nectar Mechanics, and on today's video, we're gonna be making Batarangs. So, I'm not much oh god. So, I'm not a huge fan of DC movies, right? I'm more of a Marvel guy. It's why I've got Iron Man stuff in the background, right? I'm more Marvel. But I just recently watched the Dark Knight trilogy, and I can see why people like it. The characters, the writing, the sets, the props, it all was just done to such a high quality. It's up there with the original Spider-Man trilogy for me. And the thing about Batman, he makes cool gadgets, and especially in the Dark Knight trilogy, his Batarangs are more like shurikens, and I just thought that would be really fun to try and have a go and make myself. So at first I had to consider my materials. Normally I work with like cardboard or 3D prints. I've done a bit of laser cutting, and I was like, laser cutting, that would work brilliantly. To start off with, I went into Blender. I've used Blender for about a couple years now, and I want to say I'm pretty decent at it. I found a picture of the Dark Knight Batarangs and imported that in as a reference and started tracing it. This was probably the easiest part, actually, was literally just tracing it and having it done. The hard part was getting it the right size. Blender has an add-on that lets you export as paper templates. I've used that to create foam Iron Man helmets. You should go check that video out from last year. And you can choose the scale, but the thing with Blender is that it is a nightmare to figure out what the scale is, because it has like an internal scale, and then you can set the measurements, and then it doesn't export it right, you gotta fiddle with it, and so in the end, I decided to just export it as an STL and import it into Tinkercad. Tinkercad is a free online software. It's all about increments and millimeters and all that stuff, so it's a lot better for it. I found official dimensions of one of the Batarangs made for the film on an auction site. That way I could make sure that the size was as accurate as it can be. So after fiddling around, printing it off on paper to make sure I was right, getting it wrong the first time, I ended up with a paper-sized template that was about the right size and was a good proof of concept. I figured while I was at it, I might as well model a stand for it, right? Make it look kind of cool. So I just did that in Tinkercad in like a couple hours at most, just stretching and extruding blocks, cutting it all together. Now a key thing is that the wood that I'm going to use at my makerspace is 3mm thick. So I made sure the Batarang was actually 3mm in Tinkercad, and when I made the stand for it, I could then Boolean cut it so it had an indent for it. Because it's 3mm, the same thickness as the wood, it will fit perfectly. The stand, I think we're going to 3D print, that's going to be easier. So it's time to export and send them off. I printed off 2 stands. I've learned from Laserbeak to always print off a spare if you can, and because they're so tiny and simple, they only took 3 hours. The Batarangs took even less. The laser cutter that they have at the Hive is just super powerful, and it did it in like a couple minutes. Now these are super cool as is. I could paint them black, and that could be it, that could be done. But I want to take it a step further. See, in the actual movie, the first one he cuts off is flat, but the final ones he uses have a slight bevel, and I wanted to see if I could do that. To achieve this, I went outside, wore my goggles and my mask, and took out a Dremel. I used the Dremel with various bits, just having a go around the edges. I did a test one first, only doing half of it, and it worked nicely. Sadly, it dulled the edges, so it wasn't quite as sharp, so I decided that I would keep 4 flat and sharp to see if I could try and get it to chuck into a block of foam like he does throwing it at walls. Because this isn't metal, it's not going to cut anything stronger than foam. But then for the ones that I wanted to look really nice, I would do the bevels. This didn't take a huge amount of time. I just went around the edges, trying to keep it as consistent as I could. It's still not perfect, it's done by hand, but it definitely adds an extra level of detail that I'm really happy my ones have. While I was doing that, I also made sure to add a little bit of wood filler to the 3D printed stands. I'm not too fussed about them looking perfect, but I wanted to send them a little bit, just so they weren't a raw print. And before I finished up, I added a little layer of wood filler to the Batarangs and then sanded them just to make them a little bit smoother. Once that was done, it was time for painting. To start off with, I gave them a base coat of black. Now, they're not all gonna be black, but they all do need a base coat. For the flat ones, I do want them to be just black though, so I'm going to do a second coat just to make sure that I've not missed any spots. For the beveled ones, it was time to get fancy. For the first one, I decided to paint the Dremeled edge white and then paint it over with silver. The white is slightly thicker than the silver paint, so it means that it will go on better, and any bits that I miss will be black, which will add to the detail. That's why I gave everything a base coat. The same applies to the silver and gold ones I did. I wanted them to look vaguely metallic, so I would actually get a block of sponge just off of those COVID face shield masks you get that are plastic, take the sponge headband off of them, dunk them in the paint, and splap it all over the model. The spots that I missed would be slightly darker, which again, added a lovely texture. This is the thing if you want it to look realistic. Try and figure out what textures it should be. For the Batarangs, they're meant to be metal, so these sort of splotchy looks is definitely key. Now for my favourite one. This one, I wasn't fully convinced was going to work. It was my tester one for everything. So it was the dremeling and the sanding and all that stuff. But I wanted to go real hard on it. See, if it's slightly dinged up because it's the tester one, I wasn't very experienced. You know, the ears are shorter than it should be, whatever, right? Let's just emphasize that. I want it to look rusted. I want it to look burnt. I want it to look like it's been left in a burning building and it's only just been found. And the final one, I just decided to do bronze. I was originally going to just keep it wood to kind of show what it was originally made of, but then I figured, a bronzy orangey colour would look kind of cool. Now for the stands. Originally, I gave them a base coat of black again, and then sponged on silver, but then realised that if I put anything like the silver Batarang on, it's just going to blend in. So I decided to do it a different shade of grey, just a flat grey. It was really tricky getting the grey to go over the black, and in the end I decided to go for a slightly weathered dry brush look. Once that was all done, it's time for a clear coat. If I'm going to be chucking these around, I don't want the paint to chip off. So I made sure to wear my mask and goggles again, then I would take it outside, I'd spray clear coat the front, then the back, and give it plenty of time to dry. This meant that it looked super glossy, super metallic, and would seal in the paint. Now after all that, it's time for this dark night to rise. Don't they look brilliant? Like I said, my favourite one is the super rusty oxidized one, but all of them came out really lovely. The clear coat makes them just look so shiny in the light and metallic, it's brilliant. And yeah, the flat ones are sharp enough that I can chuck them into foam like Batman. That's just a little bit on the awesome side to have a movie prop that actually works. It's basic, but it works. So yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with the idea of doing a Batman cosplay now, so make sure to subscribe to see how that goes. Probably gonna start off with the cowl or the utility belt, and we'll take it from there. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Make sure to check in next weekend, as I'm doing more Transformers reviews again, which you guys all seem to really like. So, hope you enjoy. Now if excuse me, my city needs me. Do you wanna know how I get these scars? Well, these ones are because I don't hydrate very often. That one's from a glue gun accident. Pretty sure I stabbed myself with a craft knife there. These dots are from cat bites. That's a quick that I pulled. Yeah, I really need to start taking better care of myself.